Why does it happen that the more you offer, the less you are appreciated? Why is it that the kind individual who is consistently present, open, and ready gets overlooked, kept in the shadows, or replaced without notice? Accessibility diminishes interest, and this isn't due to malevolence. It's because of our mental makeup. According to Jacqu Lon, one of the 20th century's most influential psychoanalysts, we don't yearn for what we possess. We yearn for what we lack. For Lon, desire is always a pursuit of the unreachable. In other words, by becoming overly accessible, you disrupt the tension that fuels another person's curiosity. You unintentionally turn yourself into something ordinary, and everything ordinary loses value in social interactions. This isn't about becoming an aloof manipulator or an enigmatic figure out of ego. It's about reclaiming your emotional independence and understanding that constant availability is often a disguised form of pleading for affection. The world doesn't respect those who beg. It respects those who choose. When you start acting with intention rather than reaction, everything shifts. Quietness gains a voice, and absence becomes a presence. That's when you discover the secret. Few dare to apply. The less you need to be understood, the more you are respected. The unreachable isn't the one who hides, but the one who doesn't need to explain themselves. That's what we'll discuss today. If you've ever felt that giving too much has weakened you, share your thoughts now. Never again be overly accessible. Human desire has an intriguing flaw. It moves not toward what is close, but toward what is slightly out of reach. This isn't a whim of the ego. It's the very structure of the unconscious. Jacqu Lon states, "Desire is the desire of the other." In other words, we don't desire things in themselves. We desire what others desire, what others value, what others deny. We desire what eludes us. The emotional tragedy of many is not understanding this. They believe that the more present they are, the more love they give, the more they agree, the more they will be valued. But the more available they become, the more they lose their symbolic value in the unconscious of others. Have you ever noticed how the person who ignores your messages becomes more intriguing than the one who responds instantly? Or how someone who subtly shows disinterest ends up being the center of your thoughts? This isn't because they are better, it's because they have understood, consciously or unconsciously, that desire needs scarcity to survive. Total accessibility kills tension, and without tension, there is no fascination. But here is the contradiction that is hard to accept. The world has taught you that love is presence, care, and constant surrender. Yes, this is true, but it only works when there is reciprocity and mutual desire already established. Before that, offering too much of yourself is a sentence of invisibility. The human mind responds to scarcity with attention. Marketing knows this. Cinema exploits this. Art seduces with what it doesn't show, and in the emotional game, the same thing happens. What is fully revealed loses its power to provoke. Lon goes further. The individual who surrenders completely dissolves in the desire of the other. They lose their symbolic autonomy. If you have no symbol, you have no impact. The point is that many become emotionally accessible, not out of generosity, but out of fear. Fear of losing, fear of not being loved, fear of abandonment. Driven by this fear, they fall into the trap of total self-exposure. They respond quickly, explain everything, give themselves before being chosen. This isn't love, it's desperation disguised as affection. Being inaccessible doesn't mean being arrogant, but rather strategic. It means understanding that silence can be more eloquent than any justification, that the time it takes to respond can communicate more than 1,000 words, that disappearing for a while can be worth more than being present all the time. Because when you distance yourself consciously and not punitively, you create a void, and this void is where the other person's desire is born. It's there that mystery breathes. It's there that the other person starts to wonder, why did he disappear? Did I do something wrong? Did I lose someone valuable? It's in this space of doubt that you stop being predictable and start being fascinating. This applies to everything: romantic relationships, friendships, even in the professional environment. Someone who is always available is seen as a resource. Someone who is selective becomes a privilege, and privilege is what everyone wants to have. So the question is, do you want to be a resource or a privilege? Do you want to be the safe plan B or the plan A that no one risks losing? The answer lies in how you regulate your presence in the world, and that requires courage. Because stepping out of the role of being constantly available can cause discomfort. It can generate silence. It can push away those who are used to having you easily. But what comes back after the silence comes back different, comes back more aware, comes back valuing. What doesn't come back never did. What if the greatest power was not in what you say but in what you refuse to say? In the previous chapter, we talked about the value of becoming scarce. Now let's go one step further. Silence. Because when you stop chasing, stop explaining yourself, stop trying to be understood, something starts to happen. People start to really listen to you, even when you don't speak. There's a type of presence that only arises in absence, a type of respect that only appears when you disappear. That's when silence stops being empty and becomes affirmation. Jacqu shows us that human beings desire the desire of others. When you remain silent, you create a symbolic space that forces others to fill with projections, assumptions, fantasies. This automatically turns you into a point of attention because mystery doesn't bother, it magnetizes. The mistake is in believing that silence is passivity. Nothing could be further from the truth. Silence, when used consciously, is a form of domination. It turns the game around. While everyone rushes to explain themselves, to react, to justify themselves, you stand still. At that very moment, the power changes hands. You are not omitting yourself. You are controlling the rhythm of the dance, and whoever controls the rhythm sets the pace. Think of iconic figures: Don Draper in Mad Men, Marlon Brando in The Godfather, even characters like Batman or Thomas Shelby. They all have something in common. They say little, but everything they say carries weight. More than that, their silence speaks. They use absence as a presence, the unsaid as a weapon. This is a lesson brutally ignored by those who are always trying to prove themselves. In Lacanian logic, the other, with a capital O, is this entity that defines structures and organizes desire. By positioning yourself as someone who does not give everything, who does not reveal themselves completely, you begin to occupy this symbolic place. You become the other, the reference, the parameter. In the social game, this means one thing: you become the point of gravity. Others begin to orbit around your absence, trying to understand, trying to decipher, trying to conquer. But here is the detail that separates the truly unreachable from the merely arrogant: intention. Strategic silence is not done to punish. It is done to observe, to preserve, to position. It is an exercise in selective presence, not indifferent absence. It is the conscious choice to speak when it is relevant, and to remain silent when your speech would be wasted. In everyday life, this translates into brutally simple terms. Stop responding to everything immediately. Stop justifying every choice. Stop trying to convince someone of your value. Those who have value do not prove it. They impose it. This imposition does not come through force. It comes through silence that knows how to wait. Because true power does not shout, it waits for others to be silent in order to be heard. This type of behavior generates a curious effect. People begin to treat you with more respect, not because you demand it, but because you do not give in. It's like a sculpture covered by a veil. The less you see, the more you want to see. The more you maintain this symbolic veil without games but with awareness, the more you activate the other person's unconscious. They need to complete what you haven't said. They need to interpret what you haven't revealed. In the process, you become unforgettable. In an age of overexposure, silence is rebellion. It's an act of radical power. While everyone else is competing for attention, you stand, out by withdrawing. In that withdrawal, you force others to move toward you. This isn't manipulation, it's structure. It's the way desire works, and if you don't learn to use it, you'll forever be held hostage by the need to be understood. Remember, those who explain themselves demean themselves. Those who justify themselves beg. But those who remain silent challenge, and that's what the unreachable do. They don't provoke. They impose with a calm that screams, with an absence that echoes, with a silence that dominates. Perhaps the greatest prison anyone can live in is the constant need to be loved, to be accepted, to be understood by everyone. It is a silent trap because it disguises itself as empathy, affection, and humanity. But behind the forced kindness, there is an uncomfortable truth. The obsession with validation destroys your autonomy. At this point, Jacqu Lon gives us a brutal clue. The subject is shaped by the gaze of others. Everything you believe yourself to be is born from the way others see you. If you do not take control of this narrative, you will live to meet expectations that are not yours. That is why being unreachable is, above all, an act of liberation. When you stop needing to be loved, you stop shaping yourself to please. You start to choose where you want to be, who you want to be with, and most importantly, who you want to be without filters imposed by need. The most curious thing is that when this need disappears, respect appears. Those who did not value you begin to observe you. Those who ignored you begin to seek you out. Human beings sense when someone no longer needs anything, and nothing is more magnetic than someone who is self-sufficient. But let's be honest, this freedom is scary. Giving up on the approval of others is like cutting a thread of emotional security that you've carried your whole life. You ask yourself, what if no one likes me? The answer is harsh but liberating. Then let them not like you. The goal was never to please everyone. It was to live with truth. Truth, my friend, is hard to digest for those who only consume superficiality. Here is the contradiction that few have the courage to face. You spend your life trying to be understood when true respect is born from your ability to be misunderstood and still remain whole. It's easy to feel safe when everyone approves of you. It's hard to maintain your identity when the world doesn't understand your choices. But it's at this point that you prove who you really are. The unreachable lives in this state not because they hide, but because they don't need to expose themselves. They don't force connection. They allow it to happen or not. That's where emotional dignity lies. It's not pride, it's not indifference, it's clarity. Clarity about what you deserve, what you tolerate, what you offer, and what you're no longer willing to accept. Because those who desperately need to be loved accept crumbs. Those who don't choose banquets. That's the game no one taught you to play. By freeing yourself from the expectation of being loved, you also free yourself from the guilt of disappointing, from the anxiety of pleasing, from the burden of fitting in. You begin to exist for yourself and no longer as a reflection of others. That's rare, that's powerful, and that's why it's feared. Being unreachable, after all, isn't about being cold. It's about being free. Freedom in this world conditioned by conditional affection is an act of revolution. Ultimately, being unreachable is not a social trick. It is an internal state. It is the maturity of someone who has learned that their value is not in the intensity with which they give themselves, but in the intelligence with which they preserve themselves. It is not shouting that commands respect, but silence that chooses the time to speak. In the quiet moments, power is cultivated, and true authority is born. It is in the pauses, the deliberate silences, where the world takes notice and listens intently. This silence is not mere absence of sound, but a strategic withdrawal, a calculated retreat that amplifies your presence when you finally choose to speak. That desire is born from absence, from doubt, from the frontier, not from constant availability. The allure of the unreachable is a timeless truth, a psychological underpinning that drives human behavior. It is the mystery, the enigma, that captivates and compels. When you are always present, always available, you become commonplace, taken, for granted. But when you step back, when you create a void, that is when desire begins to take root. People start to wonder, to question, to yearn for what they cannot have. Lon showed us that human beings live trapped in the desire of the other. We are social creatures, forever seeking validation and approval from those around us. This need for external affirmation can become a prison, a never-ending cycle of seeking and never quite finding fulfillment. It is a trap that keeps us small, keeps us from realizing our true potential. But when you become the other, the one who does not run, does not explain himself, does not beg, the game changes. You stop being a pawn and become a player, a force to be reckoned with. You see, it is not about being loved by everyone, but about being remembered by the right ones. Quality over quantity, impact over approval. It is about leaving a mark, a lasting impression that resonates long after you have left the room. It is about being the person who stands out, not because you shout the loudest, but because your silence speaks volumes. It is not about pleasing, but about making an impact. And the real impact only happens when you stop needing to be validated. When you no longer seek the approval of others, when you stand firm in your own worth and value, that is when you truly command respect. It is a paradox, but the less you need validation, the more it comes to you. People are drawn to confidence, to self-assurance, to those who know their worth and are not afraid to stand alone. So, if you are tired of molding yourself, of running after, of explaining yourself, stop. Become unreachable and watch the world. Begin to revolve around your selective presence. It is a powerful shift, a transformation that changes the dynamics of your relationships and your life. When you step back, when you create that space, you become the center of gravity, the one who draws others in. Now tell me, do you want to be desired by someone who never valued you, or respected by someone who trembles at your silence? The choice is yours. You can continue to chase after validation, to mold yourself to fit the expectations of others, or you can step into your power, embrace your worth, and watch as the world takes notice. The path to true respect and desire lies in the silence, in the absence, in the frontier. It is a journey worth taking, a game worth playing, and a life worth living.